I'm just chilling on the couch with the dogs. I just finished up lunch, but I got some inspiration last night to make brownies, and I wanted to try out a new recipe. And so basically what I did was I looked at the other recipes I've created for brownies before, and what I wanted to create was something really simple and easy. And usually I find that when I get these bursts of inspiration for a recipe, things just go really well in the kitchen, and it's really easy for me to dream up and create a new recipe. I don't have to do a ton of testing, and it's not like these trials and tribulations for trying to create this recipe. If I like force myself to go in and try to develop a new recipe, it's always way harder. So that's just kind of something I've learned, and I think it goes for pretty much anything in life. I actually wanted to show you a little peek. So I made these last night. I'm going to show you what they look like today. So they've been sitting out, or not sitting out, but they've been out for about 12 hours, and I think they still look really good. Okay, so here are the brownies. These are basically a one bowl easy brownie recipe. Now you guys know I have, if you follow me, quite a few different brownie recipes on my site. I've got Chewie brownies that are like box mixed style brownies. I've got my ultimate brownies, which are super tall and fudgy and super rich. These ones, I wanted them to be more of like an everyday brownie that's easy, it's one bowl, and I'm really happy with the results. But it got me thinking of a specific tip based on a question I get asked a lot about brownie baking. How do you get that really thin, like tissue thin crust that's shiny and beautiful on top of the brownies? It's super simple, guys. Let me tell you how you get this. My office because I wanted to put the camera down on the surface because I like to use my hands when I talk. So to get that tissue thin crust on a brownie recipe, well, first the recipe has to be like capable of producing that crust. If a recipe is using brown sugar, that crust is less likely to happen. If it's more of a cakey style brownie recipe, then that's also less likely to result in that tissue thin crust on top. For most recipes, you could actually achieve this by beating together the eggs and sugar in the recipe really, really well. Now, I actually have a brownie recipe that I formulated specifically that yields this result, and this technique is basically using an electric mixer to beat the eggs and sugar until they're really thick and pale in color, and that basically guarantees that crust on top. Create a meringue, and that's how that crust develops, and the texture just is so rich and fudgy but also light. It's this really weird balance of textures that I just love, and so I've used that technique in quite a few of my recipes, including my ultimate brownie recipe. But for this recipe, since I wanted to make it easy, I wanted to make it one bowl. I didn't want to have to require using an electric mixer, using a separate bowl to beat the sugar and the eggs. So what I did was I actually just used a whisk in my hand, and when I melted the semi-sweet chocolate and the butter in the recipe, I pour the sugar into that hot mixture. One, that will help the sugar dissolve because the mixture is hot. The sugar will dissolve and you won't get any graininess. I don't know if you've ever baked brownies where they've been slightly grainy or the sugar seems to be really intense. You can help mitigate that by adding the sugar into the hot melted butter and chocolate mixture. And then the second way that I got to this tissue thin crust was actually to just use my hand to whisk the sugar and eggs once I added those two ingredients into the melted butter and chocolate. And I'm so excited that the result was almost the same. I would say that the tissue thin crust on these brownies isn't quite as intense and defined as using the electric mixer, but if you're in a rush, if you don't want to dirty another set of ingredients or set of bowls, then this is a really easy way to get that result. And it's funny because as I was mentioning actually a couple weeks ago in my bakery style chocolate chip cookie recipe, you know, you can take simple recipes like cookies and brownies and small changes really yield big results. So it might seem like a small change to maybe spend an extra minute whisking the eggs and the sugar into the brownie batter. It might seem like a small change to add an egg yolk or to use bread flour in a cookie or a brownie recipe. But the result actually ends up being quite significant. It totally can alter the texture, the taste of the recipe that you're working with. This is actually something I cover a lot in the Magic of Baking, my online baking class. That class is totally available whenever, from wherever. It's not live, it's all preloaded, so you can check out more about that in the description box below if you're interested. What's really key to understand when it comes to baking is that small little tweaks and changes can yield really big results. So whether you're intending to yield a different result by making these tweaks, or whether they're unintentional, and that is really the key here, I think, is that when you're following a recipe, it's really important to follow it literally. Every step, every ingredient is there for a purpose, and it serves some scientific aspect of the recipe. And at least that's how I write it. That's how other recipe writers should be writing their recipes. And that's so important to remember, because it can be easy to think, oh, I can just skip this step, or oh, that's not really necessary, or oh, that's just going to dirty another dish. Why should I have to do that? And then you're disappointed with the results. And you might not even realize when you're actually doing that in a recipe. You might not realize when you're not following it exactly, precisely, literally, but that can truly make a world of difference. And hopefully by watching my videos and following me and seeing how I do things, you can help to improve your baking and improve your confidence in baking, and know when you read a recipe exactly what every step is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like, smell like, whatever it is, and you can be confident that you'll be able to execute those recipes really well. So I actually found a perfect example of what I'm talking about to illustrate my point. It's right behind me here. I just happen to have these cookies on hand left over from shooting another video recently, and it basically is the perfect illustration of what I'm saying. Okay, so these two cookies that you see here come from this same recipe. These are my bakery style chocolate chip cookies. The one on the left is obviously the prettier, better version, right? So what did I do differently? Well, they are the same dough, it was just treated differently. So basically, the cookie on the left, first of all, I chill the dough for 24 hours, and you can learn more about what that does in my bakery style chocolate chip cookie video. It's basically like a marination period, and it helps improve the flavor and the texture. I also rolled the ball of dough before I baked it between my palms to smooth out the dough. I did not do that with this guy over here, and you can see it has these kind of like lumps and bumps on it, and it's not as pretty looking. So number one, there's a quick obvious difference in appearance, that this one is more craggy and messy looking, and this one's a little bit more pretty. This one also benefited from that 24-hour chilling period, and this one didn't. The last difference was these cookies I baked from the freezer. The dough had sat out a little bit, so it lost its completely frozen chill, but the dough was cold when it entered the oven, and so it resulted in a cookie that's slightly thicker. That one, the dough was warm, or not warm, but it was like more of a room temperature when it entered the oven, so it was a little bit thinner. So again, this is the same dough, treated differently, and look at the different results it gave us. I went to the store, actually I went to like 3 stores earlier, one of them being Noble Bread, which is my favorite Arizona Phoenix-based bread company. They make amazing sourdough bread. I got their country loaf. You guys, if you could smell this, it smells absolutely incredible. I'm obsessed with this country. I'm obsessed with this country loaf. If you're local to Arizona, definitely check them out. They're at the farmers markets pretty much across the valley on weekends. And then of course I was at Trader Joe's, so I had to get my absolute favorite candy bar from Trader Joe's, which is the dark chocolate cookie butter candy bar. Speculoos is what they call it. You guys, this is so good. If you haven't tried it yet, definitely treat yourself the next time you're at Trader Joe's. So today is another testing day. We are actually filming a video on how to shape bread rolls in a couple days, and I already have my bread dough recipe tested and developed. I did that in partnership with Red Star Yeast actually last year. So I'm just making a big batch of that dough, in part so that I have the dough for the video for when we go to shoot it in a couple days, but also because I'm going to actually play around with how I want to shape the dough for the video and the shapes that I want to show you guys. So these days, as you can see, are not very glamorous. I've got dirty hair, sweatpants on, but I wanted to show you something. As you can see, I whipped out my big boy today because I'm making a big batch of dough with lots of flour, and my other guy can't handle that amount of flour. But I thought you might find it interesting that when I'm testing new recipes, I use the most basic ingredients possible. I use like oftentimes what's like I think maybe the most commonly used or widely available. I do not give myself an unfair advantage by using really expensive or high-end or gourmet ingredients whenever it's possible. I always try to use what I think the majority of people would be using. That goes for butter, sugar, flour, eggs, vanilla, everything like that. So yeah, as you can see, I do take a lot of effort to try to make sure that the recipes I'm creating are easy to replicate in anyone's kitchen, that you don't have to have super fancy ingredients or equipment or anything like that to be successful with my recipes. And if ever there is an ingredient or piece of equipment that I think is essential or really does make a difference, I will always specify that in the recipe post. So as you can see, there is a lot of work that goes into blogging full-time and being a food blogger and publishing content, and a lot of testing that goes on with the recipes and content that I'm creating. It's often not very glamorous, it's often very messy, there's usually a lot of dishes. It's so much fun, and usually I will just blast some music or a podcast. I've been listening to Dak Shepard's new podcast lately, which is super funny. Jared and I actually both like it. It's one we can listen to together. But yes, this is kind of really what is behind the scenes. If you are liking this video, I will keep producing more of them. I'm thinking of more and more things that I can show you behind the scenes that are maybe interesting or fun or personal, but also tons of baking tips and tricks as well, and show what goes into doing what I do for a living.
What are we doing today?
So we're shooting shaping bread rolls. I made a ton of dough, which I think you guys saw. And so now I'm just portioning out the dough, but we're not gonna be showing all of this on camera. So I'm trying to do it quickly before the dough starts to rise. That's the trouble with shooting certain things for these YouTube videos, is some things are time sensitive. And so like dough starts to rise, that's just what it's going to do. So we have to kind of work quickly so it doesn't rise too much for the sake of the video.
Smells like beer.
So today we're filming a couple videos for my YouTube channel, and I actually decided to create a whole video about those brownies because I'm obsessed with the recipe and I have so many more tips and tricks to share about brownies specifically, so keep an eye out for that video. I'm really excited about it, if it's not already posted by the time I post this one. But I wanted to show you a little bit of behind the scenes of how we film our videos. It's taken us a few months to get to where we are today, but the last couple videos that we've made I've been really excited about. So this is what it looks like from my perspective. We do not have a big kitchen. As you can see, we have a galley-style kitchen. So really the only opening where there's a somewhat pretty neutral background is this area here. So that's why some of the shots can be pretty tight in, because there's literally a wall on this side and then a counter on this side. So we're working with a small space, but we have a couple lights, 4 lights actually total over here. And then if I turn around, we have another light back here to kind of fill the background of the video so it's not super dark and gloomy and shadowy back there. And we usually film with 2 cameras, one on a tripod, and then sometimes Jared will go and hold the other camera, but I'm usually just standing right here. And the night before I like to prep all of my ingredients, so these are all of the brownie ingredients, and then that way the video goes really smoothly. And then sometimes if I'm super on top of my game, I will actually prepare the recipe that I'm making ahead of time too. But I wanted the brownies to look really nice and fresh and moist, so if I knew if I made them yesterday to shoot them today, they wouldn't quite look as fresh. So the brownies that I make on camera will be the ones that we shoot the final hero shots of. I'm super excited. All right, so we're taking a break from video shooting to go get lunch. So we just got home from lunch and we're going to get back to filming, but we made a mistake and left something in reach of the dogs, and look what they tried to eat. I'm pretty sure this was Chewie. We left some of the dough that I wasn't gonna bake off, down here. Chewie tried to eat raw bread dough. Why would you do that, bud? Isn't it tasty? You little weirdo. Chewie, sit. Chewie, sit.